What's going on, everybody? I'm Anthony Grizzaffi here with Primetime Esports, and today we are talking about this potentially really crazy Week 9 happening here tomorrow, and what that might mean for the playoffs going forward. And I don't know about you guys, but I'm really stoked about this Week 9 because not only are there a lot of really good games to watch between teams that are really close to each other, but this is also, I think, the most volatile playoffs run in a spring split that we've ever seen in the league, even before franchising. You have teams that are one game off of each other at the top of the standings, and then you have literally three other teams that are only 2 games apart from them, and they could pick up those games throughout this entire weekend. So starting off with that 100 Thieves and TSM match, looking across the roster, Someday, Meteos, Ryoma, Cody-san, and Stunt for the 100 Thieves roster, and then TSM obviously having Broken Blade, Dardoch, Bjergsen, their franchise mid laner, Kabi, and Biofrost. In terms of skill and relative strength of roster, those teams are very close, and it's gonna be a good game to watch for a couple of reasons. Number one, obviously in the standings wise, they're very close to each other, and seeing one team or the other pick up a win is going to mean a lot for the other teams that are looking to get into playoffs. If 100 Thieves lose that game, it makes it easier for TL to get in. It makes it easier for 100 Thieves, for Immortals to get in. If TSM lose that game, it makes it easier for EG and FlyQuest to kind of get that game over them in terms of standing wise, to kind of pull ahead and vie for a second or third place spot. And that game is going to mean a lot for teams like TL, who one way or the other, they're going to benefit, because if 100 Thieves goes 0-2 on the weekend, that almost definitely secures them a win in playoffs. A win to get to playoffs, assuming that they beat Cloud9, which we'll cover in a minute. And then likewise for TL, if TSM somehow manages to go 0-2 on the weekend, that opens another door because they have the head-to-head against TSM. If they win both games, that puts them at 9-9. They have the head-to-head over TSM, so that's probably a tiebreaker that just gets decided because they have the head-to-head. Now, where that kind of puts them with other teams that might have a similar scoreline as them, or teams that they don't have the head-to-head to, I'm not quite sure, because it's a really crazy scenario, because there are a lot of other teams that have to win or lose games for some of these things to happen. TL, for the most important thing being that they have to beat FlyQuest and they have to beat Cloud9, which is probably the hardest strength of schedule that they could have ended up with at the end of this split, seeing as their season hasn't been very good up until this point. Again, talking about the expectations that existed for TL going into this, they obviously haven't met that. Yes, there were, a whole range of excuses. Oh, well, Brox didn't get his visa, and then, Double kind of lost motivation. They brought in tactical, and so on and so forth. And, at some point, you have to stop the excuse and say, okay, this is an all-star team. This is a team that's, back-to-back champions 4 times. They've really only changed one role. Yes, it's a big role, but they only changed one person. They didn't go through some massive roster shakeup. And they're on paper, they really should be performing better than they are. But the reality is they aren't. So that's why they're in the situation. And in order to make playoffs, they're really going to have to outperform and really shine like the team that, most people has expected them to be. And that's a hard ask against, what is, relatively speaking, a strong FlyQuest, and what is absolutely an incredible Cloud9 right now. There aren't a lot of ways to beat that team, and they've shown that even over this last weekend, where they had probably maybe some of the ugliest looking games that they've had all split, and they still went 2-0. So by no means does TL sort of get a free pass, even if a team like TSM or 100 Thieves, drop games. They still have to do their part and win them. And I think that going forward, to watch those games, it's going to be very tense for them, because they're going to be looking at, the 100 Thieves and TSM matchup. They're going to be looking at the Dignitas and Immortals matchup. They're going to be looking to see, maybe Dignitas, a team that, is perceivably out of the playoffs run, can take a game off of Immortals and make their job easier. Maybe TL can, go 8-9, and Immortals also goes 8-9 on that day, and then Immortals maybe loses their next game, and so on and so forth. There are ways for TL to get into the playoffs, but they are very much dependent on other people, causing their rivals to lose game, particularly these teams that are more or less out of playoffs, such as Dignitas, as before mentioned, CLG, and, quite honestly, Golden Guardians. At this point, even though it's my understanding they're not technically mathematically eliminated, it's not really reliable for them. It's not really viable for them to kind of get in at this point. It's just not likely to happen. And I think that is going to be one of the interesting things to watch, because it might make Golden Guardians feel like they can just swing for the fences and play like nothing matters, because if they feel like their season is over, then they're just gonna say, well, caution to the wind, forget this. I'm not worried about losing at this point. Come at me, and that can be dangerous for a team like FlyQuest. That could be dangerous, for the standings for other teams who are looking to kind of capitalize on a loss or a win going one way or the other to some of these teams. And then some of the other games to watch maybe on the second day going into it is Immortals versus EG. Okay, Immortals is 8-8 and EG is 9-7. Depending on how their Saturday goes, that could be a very, very rough day for both of those teams, absolutely having to pick up a win or risk losing a spot. You have Golden Guardians versus FlyQuest. FlyQuest is not going to want to lose to Golden Guardians and give up that win and jeopardize their standings. But again, it could happen. 100 Thieves versus CLG. CLG's at the bottom of the league, but there's never a team more dangerous than a team that has nothing to lose. And again, 100 Thieves is not going to want to drop that game, because if they lose, it opens the door for TL. So this is an interesting dynamic, because just as much as the onus is on TL to win games, it's also on the onus is also on these other teams to win their games, because if anybody messes up a game and TL wins both of theirs, or even wins one, depending on the 100 Thieves situation, TL gets into playoffs. So it is kind of funny to say, oh, well, it's really hard for TL to get into playoffs. It is also, on that same token, very easy, because if anything crazy happens, if somebody drops a game where they're not supposed to, the whole thing explodes, and then suddenly you have a massive fight for probably one spot into playoffs. Now, before we get into ham, let's just make this clear. TL's not, if they get in, they're not going to have a great spot in playoffs. It's not going to be this, second, third place spot, that's, maybe a little more favorable. Obviously, 1 and 2 are the places where team wanted to get in with the new playoff brackets, winners and losers bracket, kind of wanted having that safety net of being able to play more games and kind of get a redemption run to go to the finals. Obviously, that's not going to happen for them. They're starting, even if they get in, they're going to start off in the losers bracket, so they have to play perfectly. But at this point, with the way that the TL roster has been playing, getting into playoffs would be a win. The same thing goes for 100 Thieves and Immortals, who maybe weren't expected to be there. If they get into playoffs, it's a huge confidence booster. It's a huge win. And then you look at teams like TSM and FlyQuest and EG. They were, more or less expected to do fairly well. Maybe not so much FlyQuest in terms of early season expectations, but you look at these rosters and you expect, good runs out of them. You expect them to make it to playoffs for certain. And, so, the expectation for them and for their coaches and for the fan base and, for anybody just watching is you want to see those teams win the games to absolutely put their stamp on the whole season and get into that second spot. And what we're talking about, these very, very close games from teams that really need to win them in order to kind of secure that second place spot between TSM, EG, and FlyQuest, it's going to be crazy to watch, and there's no guarantee that they win them. There's just not. And the whole potential shakeup across the entire league of teams winning or losing one game is crazy for this playoff run. And I absolutely cannot wait to see it, because it is going to be some of the most competitive and close league we've seen in a long time. And I don't know about you, but that's very, very exciting.